Imagine the age when torchlight flickered against wattle and daub walls, when the scent of wood smoke and herb gardens drifted through narrow lanes, and the sound of evening bells marked the passage from daylight to darkness. You cannot picture medieval England without the thatched cottages clustered near the manor house, or the great hall where firelight danced across worn timber beams. But tonight, we are not here for grand feasts or noble tournaments. We are here for the moment when the village sleeps. We will walk the cobblestone paths when only moonlight touches the gardens, listen to the wind moving through the willow branches, and discover the quiet details hidden in the shadows of everyday life. And you will experience it all without leaving your bed. This evening, we are wandering through a night in medieval England. If you are ready to relax, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into sleep. And I would love to know from which part of the world are you listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. Now, we begin. We arrive at the edge of the village just as the last golden light fades from the western sky. The air has cooled with the approach of evening, carrying with it the earthy smell of turned soil from the nearby fields, and something sweeter, perhaps lavender, drying in bundles, or the last roses clinging to autumn warmth. In the distance, a single candle appears in a cottage window, then another, like stars being born one at a time across the darkening landscape. The village before us sits low against the hillside, its thatched roofs blending with the surrounding woods, as though the settlement grew naturally from the earth itself. This is not a place of hurry or noise. It is a place where life moves with the seasons, where each day ends as countless days have ended before, and where the night brings a stillness so complete it seems to hold the very essence of peace. Notice how the path beneath your feet changes from dirt to cobblestone as we cross the invisible threshold into the village proper, each stone worn smooth by generations of footsteps, each one holding the memory of the lives that passed this way. The first cottage we approach sits slightly apart from the others, its timber frame darkened by years of weather and smoke. The wattle and daub walls between the beams have been freshly coated with lime wash, giving them a ghostly pallor in the fading light. Through the small window, no larger than a book lying open, you can see the warm amber glow of rushlight, that humble illumination made from common rushes dipped in animal fat and set in a simple holder. The light is not bright. It does not flood the room or banish shadows to the corners. Instead, it creates a small sphere of gentle warmth, just enough to see by, just enough to comfort. The people of this cottage would have prepared their rushes themselves, gathering them from the marshy ground near the stream, selecting only the straightest and longest, then stripping away the outer skin to reveal the spongy pith inside. After drying, each rush was drawn slowly through melted fat, usually mutton tallow saved from cooking and left to harden. A single rush might burn for perhaps 20 minutes, and a family would go through dozens in the course of a long winter evening. The scent it produces is distinctive, not unpleasant, but unmistakably animal, mixing with the ever-present smell of the hearth fire to create an aroma that would have meant home to anyone living in this time. Look now at the door of the cottage, and you will see something curious, a small wreath of dried herbs hanging from an iron nail. Rosemary, thyme, and what might be fennel, their stems bound with rough twine, their leaves long since faded from green to brown, yet still holding their fragrance. This is not mere decoration. In medieval England, such bundles served practical purposes that blurred beautifully with belief and custom. Rosemary was thought to bring protection and peace to the household, its sharp, clean scent believed to ward off illness and misfortune. Thyme offered courage and strength, its tiny leaves treasured both for cooking and for the sense of security they were thought to provide. Fennel, with its sweet, licorice-like aroma, was associated with longevity and renewal. But beyond these symbolic meanings, the herbs served a genuine function. They helped mask the smells of daily life in close quarters, offering a small but cherished improvement to the air inside. Imagine the ritual of gathering these plants in summer, when the sun was high and the gardens at their fullest. Someone would have chosen each stem with care, knowing these would hang through autumn and winter, a reminder of warmer days and a promise that such days would come again. The herbs would have been tied while still fresh and hung in an airy place to dry slowly, preserving both scent and form. And now, here they hang, a quiet guardian over the threshold, their presence so ordinary to the people of this cottage that they likely never think of them at all. We move on, following the narrow lane between cottages, and the cobblestones beneath our feet tell their own story through texture and sound. Some stones sit proud of their neighbours, others have sunk slightly into the earth, creating a gentle rolling surface that would challenge wagon wheels, but feels natural to those who walk here daily. In daylight, you would see how each stone differs, some grey, some brown, some flecked with mica that catches the sun. But now, in the deepening dusk, they blur into a single ribbon of darker grey against the lighter dirt of the lane's edges. These stones were not cut or shaped. They were gathered from fields and riverbeds, chosen for flatness and size, then fitted together like a puzzle with no fixed pattern. The gaps between them allow rainwater to drain away, preventing the lane from becoming an impassable river of mud during storms. In summer, tiny plants pennywort and creeping thyme grow in these gaps, softening the appearance of the lane and releasing fragrance when trodden upon. But now, in the cooler months, the gaps hold only a few dried stems and the occasional wisp of straw blown from a nearby roof. The sound our footsteps make is soft, almost muffled, as though the stones have learned to keep secrets, to let travellers pass without announcement. This lane has seen wedding processions and funeral marches, merchants with laden carts, and children playing games that date back beyond memory. Each season leaves its mark in subtle ways. Frost cracks a stone here, tree roots lift another there, and yet the lane remains, as permanent as anything human-made can be, a testament to the enduring nature of simple, honest work. As we walk, the smell of wood smoke grows stronger, and we realize it comes not from one source, but from many, each cottage sending its evening fire's breath up through roof holes and out through doors opened briefly to the night. This is not the acrid smoke of green wood or damp kindling, but the clean, almost sweet smoke of well-seasoned timber, likely oak or ash, cut and stored for a full year before being deemed fit for the hearth. The medieval hearth sat at the centre of the main room, not built into a wall as we might expect, but rather occupying a place of honour in the middle of the floor, allowing warmth to radiate in all directions. Without chimneys, in most common dwellings, the smoke rose naturally toward the roof, where it would seep out through the thatch or through a simple opening left for this purpose. This arrangement had an unexpected benefit. The smoke passing through the thatch helped to preserve it, discouraging insects and fungi that might otherwise damage the straw. It also cured any meat or fish hanging from the rafters, adding flavour and extending preservation through the winter months. The smoke inside the cottage would have been constant, never thick enough to choke, but present enough to sting the eyes slightly, a fact of life so ordinary that medieval people hardly noticed it. Visitors from outside, however, would have remarked upon it immediately, the way we might notice a strong perfume or unfamiliar cooking smell. The hearth fire was rarely allowed to die completely, even in summer, for starting a fire required effort striking flint against steel to create sparks that would catch on charcloth or dried fungus, then carefully nursing these sparks into flame among tinder. Far easier to keep a fire going than to begin anew each day. And so the smoke continues, day and night, season after season, becoming as much a part of the cottage as the walls themselves. The lane curves gently to the right, and we follow it toward the center of the village, where cottages cluster more closely together and the first signs of communal life appear. To our left, a wooden trough sits beneath a simple spout fed by a channel that brings water from a nearby spring. The trough is worn smooth by countless hands dipping buckets, and even now, in the dim light, you can see water droplets clinging to its rim, reflecting what little sky glow remains. This is the village's water source, precious and carefully maintained, protected from animals by a low wooden fence and from debris by a covering of woven hazel branches. The water that flows here is clear and cold, fed by underground streams that filter through layers of stone and sand, emerging pure enough to drink without treatment. In a time when rivers might run foul downstream of other settlements, and when wells could be contaminated by seeping waste, a reliable spring was worth more than gold to a community. The right to use this water, the responsibility to maintain the channel and trough, the rules about washing clothes or watering livestock, all these would have been governed by ancient agreements passed down through generations, understood by everyone and enforced by collective will. Someone would have carved or marked these wooden structures, perhaps with a cross or a simple prayer, acknowledging the sacred nature of clean water and asking for continued blessing. The sound of water trickling into the trough is gentle, almost musical, a constant backdrop to village life that continues whether anyone is listening or not. Near the trough, a timber post rises from the ground, and from it hangs a lantern containing a single candle sheltered behind thin panels of horn. This is one of the village's few shared lights, maintained by whoever remembers to tend it, offering guidance to anyone walking the lanes after dark. The horn panels are translucent rather than transparent, made from cow horn that has been softened in hot water, pressed flat, then shaped while still warm. When cool and hard, the horn becomes surprisingly clear, allowing candlelight to pass through while protecting the flame from wind and rain. The light it casts is warm and amber tinted, slightly diffused, creating more of an atmosphere than true illumination. You could not read by this light, could not perform detailed work, but you could see the lane ahead, could find your footing on the cobblestones, could feel less alone in the darkness. The candle inside is thick and short, made from beeswax if the village is prosperous, or from tallow if funds are scarce. Beeswax burns cleaner and smells sweeter, with a honey-like fragrance that improves the night air, while tallow candles smoke more and carry that same animal scent as the rushlight we saw earlier. Either way, the candle will burn for several hours before needing replacement, and come morning, someone will extinguish it carefully to preserve what remains. The lantern itself is a simple construction, a wooden frame with the horn panels fitted into grooves, a small door on one side for access, and a hook on top for hanging. It has weathered many seasons, its wood gone grey and slightly twisted, but it continues to serve, night after night, a small beacon of human presence in the vast darkness of the countryside. We continue toward the heart of the village, and now we can make out the shape of the church rising against the darkening sky. Its stone tower stands taller than any other structure, topped with a simple wooden cross that points toward the stars beginning to appear overhead. The church sits on a slight rise, giving it prominence and allowing its bells to be heard across the entire valley. Those bells fell silent at sunset, their last ringing of the day, marking the end of the Angelus prayer, calling the faithful to pause wherever they were and offer a moment of devotion. The sound would have carried over the fields, reaching even the most distant shepherd or woodcutter, drawing all minds together for that brief instant before the night's work began. Now the bell tower sits quiet, its openings dark, waiting for dawn when the pattern will begin again. The church itself is built of local stone, quarried from the hillside, perhaps a mile distant, and hauled here by cart and oxen, each block shaped by patient hands using simple tools, iron chisels, wooden mallets, measuring strings. The walls are thick, built to last centuries, their surfaces showing the marks of the masons who cut them small grooves, slightly irregular edges, the subtle variance that tells you human hands, not machines, did this work. Around the church, a low stone wall marks the boundary of consecrated ground, and beyond this wall lie the graves of generations, their markers mostly simple wooden crosses or carved stones so weathered that names have faded beyond reading. This is sacred space, set apart from daily life yet integral to it, a place of baptisms and weddings, funerals and feast days, a constant reminder of eternity amid the temporal concerns of planting and harvest. The church door is oak, thick as a man's forearm, and bound with iron straps that create decorative patterns across its surface. By day, this door would stand open, welcoming any who wished to enter for prayer or contemplation. But now, with night fallen, it is closed and secured with a heavy iron latch. The wood of the door is dark with age and oiled regularly to preserve it against the weather. Running your hand across its surface, if you could, you would feel the grain raised slightly, evidence of countless rainstorms that swelled the wood, followed by sun that shrank it again, creating a topography of tiny ridges and valleys. Near the base of the door, the wood is more worn, polished almost, from the passage of feet over decades. People entering the church would brush against it, children would touch it as they passed, and the accumulation of these small contacts has left its mark. Set into the door at eye level is a smaller door called a wicket, just large enough for one person to step through when the main door is barred. This allows the priest entry at any hour without the labor of opening the massive portal, and it serves also as a symbolic gesture, the humble entrance through which even the powerful must bow their heads. The iron hardware hinges, latch, the decorative studs that strengthen the joints, all of it was made by the village blacksmith, heated in his forge until glowing red, then shaped on the anvil with hammer strikes that rang across the village like irregular bells. Each piece was fitted carefully, the measurements taken directly rather than from drawings, the smith working by eye and experience to ensure the door would hang true and swing smoothly for generations. We turn away from the church and find ourselves facing the manor house, visible through a gap between cottages, its bulk rising against the night sky. This is the residence of the local lord and his household, the centre of authority and organisation for the village and surrounding lands. Unlike the cottages with their wattle and daub walls, the manor house is built primarily of timber and stone, with walls thick enough to keep out winter cold and a roof of clay tiles rather than thatch. The building sits behind a low wooden fence, more symbolic than defensive, marking the boundary between the lord's private space and the communal areas of the village. Even from here, we can see that several windows show light, more windows than any cottage possesses, and some of them glazed with small panes of glass held together by lead strips. This glass is precious, expensive, a mark of wealth and status. It allows light to enter while keeping out the cold, something impossible with the simple cloth or wooden shutters used by common folk. The glass is not clear. Like modern windows, it is full of bubbles and waves, slightly greenish or amber tinted, distorting whatever view it offers, but it represents a luxury beyond the reach of most. Through one of these windows, you might glimpse movement, a shadow passing before the light, someone preparing the hall for the evening meal, or tending to the fire that warms the main chamber. The manor house operates on a different rhythm than the cottages, with servants and retainers moving about later into the night, preparing tomorrow's bread, checking on livestock in the barns, ensuring everything is secure before the household finally settles. Let us approach the manor house more closely, crossing the symbolic boundary marked by the wooden fence. The gate stands open. There is no real threat here, no need for defensive walls or guards, and the path from gate to door is laid with flat stones larger than those in the village lane, fitted more carefully to create a smoother surface befitting the status of this dwelling. On either side of the path, raised beds contain herbs and medicinal plants, dormant now in the cooling season, but still showing signs of careful tending. These gardens serve practical purposes, providing seasonings for the Lord's table, remedies for common ailments, strewing herbs for the floors, but they also demonstrate the household's ability to maintain beauty alongside utility. Among the plants you might recognize: lavender's grey-green stems, sage's soft leaves, and the tall dried stalks of fennel we saw at the cottage earlier, all waiting for spring to return their colour and fragrance. Between the herb beds, the earth has been turned and left in neat furrows, ready for winter's frost to break it down into finer tilth for spring planting. This work is not done by the Lord himself, but by his gardeners, skilled men and women who understand the needs of each plant, who know when to harvest and how to preserve, whose knowledge passes from master to apprentice, in the same way that masonry and smithing pass through generations. The manor house door is larger than the church door, wide enough for two people to walk through side by side, and similarly bound with iron. But here the ironwork is more decorative, the straps ending in curves and flourishes that catch what little light remains. A heavy ring serves as both knocker and handle, worn bright by use, and above the door, a carved wooden lintel shows the family's coat of arms, simple compared to greater nobles. Perhaps just a few symbols indicating lineage and lordship, painted in colours that have faded but not disappeared entirely. The door stands slightly ajar, not from carelessness, but from the constant traffic of servants moving in and out, carrying wood for the fires, bringing water from the well, emptying chamber pots, fetching supplies from the various outbuildings. We could enter. There is no one to stop us on this imaginary journey. But instead, we pause here, taking in the sounds and smells that drift from within. The crackle of a substantial fire larger than any cottage hearth, burning logs as thick as a man's leg. The murmur of voices, though the words are indistinct, speaking in the Middle English dialect that would sound foreign to our modern ears, yet strangely familiar in its rhythms. The smell of roasting meat, something rich and fatty, perhaps mutton or pork, turning on a spit somewhere in the depths of the building. And beneath it all, the smell of rush-covered floors, the green reeds spread across the packed earth or wooden boards to provide cushioning and absorb spills, replaced regularly, but always carrying a faint scent of vegetation and the herbs strewn among them, meadowsweet and chamomile, chosen as much for their fragrance as for their availability. Let us not enter the manor house just yet, but instead walk around to its side, where outbuildings cluster like children near a parent. The first we encounter is the bakehouse, a separate structure built deliberately away from the main dwelling to reduce fire risk. Bread was the foundation of the medieval diet, consumed at every meal, and the preparation of it was taken seriously. The bakehouse contains a large stone oven, its rounded dome built with bricks shaped to fit the curve, its opening facing toward the door to allow heat to escape without overheating the building. During the day, this oven would have been fired with wood until the bricks glowed with stored heat. Then the coals would have been raked out and loaves of dough slid in on long wooden paddles called peels. The bread would bake in the residual heat, the stone slowly releasing its warmth to create a crust that was crisp outside and soft within. By this hour, the day's baking is long finished, but the oven still holds warmth, radiating a gentle heat that makes the bakehouse noticeably warmer than the night air outside. If we could step inside, we would smell the lingering aroma of baked grain, that comforting yeasty scent that speaks of nourishment and home. The flour used here would have been ground at the village mill from grain grown in the surrounding fields, a cycle of planting, harvest, grinding, and baking that repeated year after year, connecting the land to the table in the most direct way possible. Different grades of flour produced different breads. Fine white flour for the Lord's table, coarser flour with more bran for the servants, and the roughest flour, still containing bits of grain husk, for the field workers who needed dense, filling bread that would sustain them through long days of physical labor. Next to the bakehouse stands the brewery, another essential building in the manor complex. Water, as clean as it might be from the spring, could not always be trusted, especially when taken from wells or streams that might be contaminated by upstream activities. But ale, weak ale, brewed daily and consumed fresh, was safer, the brewing process killing harmful elements through boiling and fermentation. The brewing was typically done by women, a skill passed from mother to daughter, involving careful attention to temperature, timing, and the quality of ingredients. Barley would be malted by soaking it until it sprouted, then drying it to stop the growth, a process that converted the grain's starches into sugars that yeast could ferment. The malted barley was then crushed and mixed with hot water, creating a sweet liquid called wort, which was flavored with herbs often groot, a mixture that might include bog myrtle, yarrow, and wild rosemary before yeast was added to begin fermentation. This happened in large wooden barrels that stood in rows inside the brewery, each one releasing a subtle hissing sound as the yeast worked, converting sugar to alcohol and creating bubbles of carbon dioxide that rose through the liquid and popped at the surface. The smell of the brewery is distinctive, sweet and slightly sour at once, with the yeasty, bready aroma of fermentation mixed with the herbal notes of whatever flavorings were used. The ale produced here would not be strong by modern standards, perhaps 3 or 4% alcohol, meant to be consumed throughout the day by everyone from children to elders, providing calories and hydration without the risks of untreated water. Beyond the brewery, we find the stable, a long wooden building with a roof that extends out to create a covered area where saddles and bridles hang from pegs driven into the posts. The stable houses the Lord's horses, not many, perhaps 3 or 4, riding horses and a couple of draft animals used for heavy work, each one representing significant wealth and requiring daily care. Inside, the smell is rich and earthy, a combination of hay, horse sweat, leather, and manure, not unpleasant to those accustomed to it. Speaking of life and work and the partnership between humans and animals, the horses stand in individual stalls, their bodies dark shapes in the dimness, their breath visible as faint clouds in the cooling air. You can hear them shifting their weight, the soft sound of hooves on packed earth, the occasional snort or whicker as they settle for the night. Each horse would have been brushed today, its coat curried to remove dirt and distribute the natural oils that keep the skin healthy, its hooves picked clean of stones and mud, its mane combed free of tangles. The hay in their feed boxes is sweet-smelling, cut from meadows in high summer and dried to preserve it, each mouthful carrying the essence of sunny days and wildflowers. The stable boy, whose task it is to tend these animals, has already finished his evening work and retreated to his own small sleeping space, perhaps a loft above the stalls, where body heat from the horses below helps keep him warm through the night. His life is one of routine and responsibility, rising before dawn to muck out the stalls, feed and water the animals, check for any signs of injury or illness, prepare tack for the day's riding, and then reverse the process at day's end, ensuring each horse is comfortable and secure before he can rest himself. We step back outside, leaving the warmth and smell of the stable behind, and find ourselves in the manor's courtyard, a space enclosed on 3 sides by buildings and open to the night on the 4th. The ground here is a mixture of cobblestones near the buildings and packed earth elsewhere, worn smooth by constant traffic, but showing dips and ridges where water has run during storms. At the center of the courtyard stands a well, its circular stone wall rising to waist height, topped with a wooden roof to keep rain from contaminating the water below. A windlass is mounted across the well's opening, its wooden wheel carved from a single piece of oak, its rope thick and knotted at intervals to improve grip. Lowering a bucket into this well and drawing it up again requires real effort. The water lies far below, perhaps 30 feet or more, reached through layers of earth and stone that filter it to purity. The well serves the entire manor household, providing water for cooking, washing, and drinking, its depth keeping the water cool even in summer and preventing it from freezing solid in winter. Around the well's rim, the stone is worn into grooves where the rope has rubbed for decades, creating smooth channels that catch the moonlight and shine faintly. Someone has left a wooden bucket sitting on the wall, its handle propped against the rope, ready for the first person who will need water come morning. The bucket is made of wooden staves bound with iron hoops, its interior stained dark from years of use, its construction simple but effective, a design that has changed little in centuries because it works perfectly for its purpose. From the courtyard, we can see across to the Lord's private garden, a small enclosed space visible through a wooden trellis gate. This garden serves no practical purpose. Like the herb beds near the door instead, it exists for pleasure, a luxury that speaks to the Lord's status and education. Within, you might find ornamental plants chosen for their beauty or symbolism. Roses representing love and devotion, lilies for purity, perhaps a small fountain or fish pond if water can be directed here from a stream. By night, in this season, the garden shows only dark shapes and shadows, but imagination can fill in what daylight would reveal paths of crushed shell or gravel winding between planted beds. A wooden bench for sitting and contemplating, espaliered fruit trees trained to grow flat against the south-facing wall to maximize their warmth and productivity. This is a space for walking slowly, for conversation or solitude, for reading aloud from manuscripts if the Lord is literate, for music if musicians can be summoned. It represents the beginning of a shift in how wealthy people thought about their surroundings, no longer seeing all land purely as resource to be exploited, but appreciating beauty for its own sake, creating spaces that served the spirit rather than the stomach. The care of this garden would fall to a specialized gardener, someone with knowledge of plants beyond the purely practical, who could graft trees, propagate difficult flowers, and maintain the aesthetic balance that makes such a space pleasing to contemplate. Let us leave the manor grounds now and return to the village lanes, where the night has deepened and the stars have emerged in full glory overhead. Without the light pollution that will come in future centuries, the medieval night sky is spectacular, filled with more stars than most of us will ever see, so numerous they seem almost crowded, creating a glowing band across the heavens that we call the Milky Way. Medieval people knew these stars well, using them for navigation, timekeeping, and divination. Constellations had names and stories, many inherited from ancient Greece and Rome, others created by local tradition. The North Star served as a fixed point, always in the same place, allowing travelers to orient themselves even on the darkest nights. The moon, when visible, provided enough light to work or travel by, its phases marking the passage of time as reliably as any calendar. Tonight, the moon is waxing toward full, hanging low in the eastern sky, its light painting the village in shades of silver and shadow, making the cobblestones gleam and turning the thatch on the cottage roofs into something almost magical. Under this light, we can see well enough to continue our wandering, moving between buildings, noticing details that would be invisible in complete darkness. We pass a cottage where someone has left their garden tools leaning against the outer wall, a wooden rake with ash handle and carved teeth, a spade with an iron blade and oak shaft, a hoe whose blade has been sharpened so many times it has curved slightly from the repeated filing. These tools represent significant investment for a peasant family, the iron portions especially valuable and carefully maintained, sharpened regularly, oiled to prevent rust, replaced only when absolutely necessary. The wooden handles show the patina of long use, darkened by the oils from countless hands, worn smooth in the places where grip is applied, slightly rough elsewhere. Each tool was made by craftspeople, the blacksmith forging the metal parts, the woodworker shaping the handles, and each will be used until it breaks beyond repair. Then the parts will be salvaged if possible, the iron reforged into something else, the wood burned for fuel or used for some smaller purpose. Nothing is wasted in this world where every object represents hours of labor and precious resources. The rake might have belonged to the cottage owner's father, passed down when he grew too old to work the fields, carrying with it not just utility, but memory and continuity. Using your father's tools creates a connection across time, a physical link to previous generations, a reminder that you are part of a chain that extends both backward into the past and forward into a future you help create. Near the tools, a wooden trough sits half full of rainwater, its surface reflecting the moon and stars like a mirror. Small creatures have visited this water during the day. You can see tiny paw prints in the mud around the trough's base, perhaps from cats or small dogs, and the water itself shows evidence of birds who came to drink, leaving small feathers floating on the surface. This water will be used for washing hands before meals, for rinsing vegetables from the garden, for dampening cloth before spinning, for a dozen small tasks that require water but not the purity needed for drinking. The trough is hand-carved from a single log, the interior hollowed out using augers and adzes, the exterior left rough with bark still clinging in places. It has split slightly on one side, the crack widening over years of expansion and contraction with changing weather, but the split has been mended with a wooden plug and sealed with pitch to prevent leaking. This repair speaks to the care given to useful objects, the unwillingness to discard something that can be fixed, the understanding that resources are finite and must be husbanded carefully. The person who made this repair, perhaps the current cottage owner, perhaps a neighbor with better carpentry skills, would have taken pride in the work, knowing that their effort extended the trough's useful life by years and saved the considerable expense and labor of creating a replacement. As we continue walking, we notice that most cottages now show no light at all. The families within have finished their evening tasks and gone to sleep, huddling together for warmth under wool blankets and sheepskins. The children sleeping in the loft space above the main room, where heat from the fire below rises to keep them warm. Medieval people slept differently than we do, their nights divided into segments called first sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. During this midnight waking period, people might pray, tend the fire, check on livestock, visit neighbors, or engage in quiet conversation with their sleeping partners. This pattern was so common, so universal, that it shaped the rhythm of night as surely as the sun shaped the day. The sleep itself was deep and restorative, earned by physical labor that left the body exhausted and ready for rest, unmarred by the mental stimulation and artificial light that would later disrupt human sleep patterns. Lying on straw mattresses covered with linen sheets, under roofs that creaked in the wind and let in occasional drafts despite careful maintenance, medieval people found rest in simplicity, their dreams perhaps shaped by the same concerns that filled their waking hours: the success of crops, the health of animals, the safety of family, the hope for sufficient food through the coming winter. We find ourselves approaching the edge of the village again, but from a different direction than we entered, and here the cottages give way to a field that stretches into darkness, its boundaries marked by hedgerows planted generations ago. These hedgerows serve multiple purposes. They mark property lines, provide windbreaks for crops, offer habitat for birds and small animals, and supply thorny barriers that keep livestock contained without the expense of wooden fencing. The hedgerow nearest us consists primarily of hawthorn, its branches now bare of leaves, but thick with thorns that make it nearly impassable. In spring, this same hedge will burst into white blossoms that smell sweetly and attract clouds of insects, which in turn draw birds to nest in the protected interior. Come autumn, red berries called haws will appear, providing food for wildlife, and, when properly prepared, a tart addition to human diets as well. The base of the hedgerow is thick with accumulated leaf litter and decaying vegetation, creating rich soil that encourages a whole community of plants. Primroses, violets, celandine all sleeping now, but ready to emerge at the first hint of spring. Walking along this hedgerow, we can hear small sounds of nocturnal life. A rustle that might be a hedgehog foraging for insects. A soft call that could be an owl settling on a branch. The whisper of a breeze moving through dried stems. This is a living boundary, one that requires annual maintenance, cutting back aggressive growth, filling gaps where plants have died, encouraging density through careful trimming, but that repays this care with decades of service. The field beyond the hedgerow has been ploughed and left fallow, part of the crop rotation system that keeps the land productive without exhausting it. Medieval agriculture operated on a 3-field system in many areas. One field planted with winter wheat or rye, one planted with spring crops like barley or oats, and one left fallow to recover. Each year the fields would rotate, ensuring that no single plot bore crops continuously. The fallow field was not idle. Livestock might graze it, adding their manure to enrich the soil, or it might be ploughed several times during the growing season to turn weeds under and break up the soil structure, incorporating air and organic matter. This field shows evidence of recent ploughing, the furrows running in straight lines as far as the moonlight reveals, each one a monument to the skill of the ploughman who guided his oxen or horses with voice commands and subtle pressure on the plough handles, maintaining direction by sighting on distant landmarks, creating these parallel lines without measuring tools or guides. The soil here is heavy clay, difficult to work, but fertile when properly managed, holding moisture through dry spells, but requiring careful drainage to prevent waterlogging. It smells rich and alive, a scent you can taste in the back of your throat, speaking of countless cycles of growth and decay, of minerals brought up from deep below by earthworm burrows and root penetration, of the fundamental processes that connect rock to soil, to plant, to animal, to human, and back again. At the far edge of the visible field, a small wooden structure stands alone, a field shelter used during harvest, offering shade to workers during their midday rest and storage for tools, too heavy to carry back to the village each night. The shelter is simple, just 4 posts supporting a thatched roof with no walls, open to the weather from all sides, but providing protection from sun and rain for those beneath. The thatch on this roof is older than that on the cottage roofs, its colour darker, its texture more ragged, with bits of straw hanging down and stirring in the breeze. This matters less here than on a dwelling. A few leaks in a field shelter are inconvenient but not dangerous, so the roof receives attention only when it becomes truly inadequate. Beneath the shelter, we can make out the shapes of equipment left for the next ploughing. A wooden harrow used for breaking up clods of earth after ploughing, its frame made of ash and its teeth of oak, designed to be dragged behind animals to create the fine seedbed needed for planting. The harrow is heavy, built to last for decades, its joints pegged together with wooden dowels rather than nails, which were too precious to use liberally. Nearby, a collection of woven willow baskets sits stacked inside each other, waiting for harvest time when they will be filled with grain and carried to the barn for threshing. These baskets are works of patient craft, made during winter evenings when outdoor work is impossible. The willow harvested in spring when the sap rises and makes the branches flexible, then stored until needed and soaked again before weaving to restore pliability. We turn back toward the village, leaving the field to its quiet rest, and as we walk, we notice something we had not seen before: a small stone cross standing beside the path. This is a wayside cross, one of many that dot the medieval landscape, serving as markers for travelers, reminders of faith, and focal points for prayer. The cross is carved from local stone, perhaps limestone, its surface weathered to softness, its edges rounded by decades of rain and wind. The vertical shaft rises to about shoulder height, widening at the top to form the crosspiece, and the whole thing sits on a base of stacked stones that keep it upright and level. Someone has left an offering at its base, a small bunch of dried flowers, now faded to brown, but still recognizable as having been placed with care and intention. This offering might be a prayer for safe travel, or thanksgiving for a journey completed, or remembrance of someone who died and is buried in the churchyard beyond. Medieval people lived surrounded by symbols of their faith, not just in churches, but woven into daily life through such markers, through the practices of praying at certain hours, through the understanding that every aspect of existence had spiritual dimension. This cross stands as testament to that worldview, silent but present, asking nothing, but offering the opportunity for those who pass to pause, to reflect, to connect their small lives to something larger and more enduring. As we approach the village center again, we find ourselves drawn to the church, which seems to glow faintly in the moonlight, its stone walls catching and holding the silver illumination. The building is oriented east-west, as all churches were, with the altar at the eastern end facing Jerusalem and the rising sun, a reminder of resurrection and hope. Walking around the church's exterior, we can see the careful stonework more clearly now, the way each block is fitted to its neighbors, the mortar between them marked by the trowel that smoothed it centuries ago. Some stones show the marks of the masons who shaped them, small symbols or initials carved discreetly, a way of marking individual contribution to collective work. The church windows are narrow slits, splayed wider on the interior to allow more light to enter while keeping the exterior defensible, a remnant from earlier, less peaceful times. These windows contain no glass except in the east window above the altar, where a wealthy patron once donated enough for a single stained glass panel showing a simple scene of saints or biblical events. The rest of the windows are shuttered with wood on the inside, opened during services to admit light and air, closed at other times to preserve warmth and protect the interior from weather. The church door, which we saw earlier from a distance, now stands before us in detail. The oak has aged to almost black, its surface hard as iron where it has not been worn by touch. The iron straps are forged in patterns that serve both function and decoration. The long horizontal pieces keep the boards from warping, while the decorative terminals curl and loop in designs that might suggest vines or abstract shapes, the smith's creativity expressing itself within the constraints of utility. The door handle is a ring of twisted iron, worn bright where generations of hands have grasped it, still showing rough texture where hands rarely touch. Pulling on this ring would lift the latch inside, allowing the door to swing open on its massive hinges. Each one, as long as your forearm and mounted with pins that have been oiled regularly enough to allow smooth movement despite their weight. This door has witnessed every significant moment in village life. Baptisms where infants were welcomed into the faith, weddings where young couples began their lives together, funerals where the community said farewell to its members, feast day celebrations that blended religious observance with social gathering. The door has been closed against storms that threatened to tear it from its hinges, opened wide on summer days when processions carried holy relics through the village. Scratched by the claws of dogs who accompanied their masters to service and waited patiently during the hours of worship. Let us imagine the door opening. We need not physically move it. Just allow our imagination to carry us across the threshold into the church interior. The space inside is cool and still, smelling of stone and old wood, beeswax and incense residue, scents that have accumulated over years until they become part of the building itself. The floor is paved with stone slabs, worn smooth by centuries of feet, marked here and there with brass plaques commemorating prominent parishioners who paid for the privilege of being buried beneath the church floor. The nave extends before us, flanked by simple wooden benches, not pews with individual seats, but long benches that seat many, their surfaces polished by the wool and linen of countless worshippers, their edges bearing the carved initials of bored children who sat through services they could not understand, their feet dangling above the floor. The ceiling is timber, supported by massive oak beams that span the width of the nave, each beam a single tree selected for its size and straightness, felled and hauled here with enormous effort, trimmed and fitted into place to carry the weight of the roof for centuries. These beams are dark with age and smoke from candles and lamps, their surfaces showing the adze marks of the carpenters who shaped them, their joints precisely cut to bear load without pulling apart or crushing under stress. At the eastern end of the church, the altar stands on a raised platform, covered with a white linen cloth that hangs to the floor on all sides, embroidered at the edges with simple crosses in red thread. Upon this cloth sit the sacred vessels, a chalice of silver for the wine, a paten for the bread, both kept polished to a soft gleam that catches whatever light finds its way into this shadowed space. Behind the altar, the east window we glimpsed from outside glows faintly, its coloured glass holding just enough moonlight to show the figures depicted there, perhaps Mary holding the infant Jesus, or Christ showing his wounds after resurrection, or a local saint whose intercession is particularly valued by this community. The colours are deep and rich, ruby red, sapphire blue, emerald green, created by adding metal oxides to molten glass, an art form that transforms sand into beauty, light into storytelling. During daylight services, the sun streaming through this window would bathe the altar in coloured light, creating an atmosphere of otherworldly beauty that transported worshippers from their daily concerns into contemplation of eternal truths. Now, at night, the window is reversed. We see it from inside as a dark shape against the slightly lighter night sky, but someone outside would see it catching whatever interior light exists and projecting it outward, a beacon of faith shining into the darkness. To the left of the altar, a small door leads to the sacristy, where vestments and sacred objects are stored when not in use. This room is tiny, barely large enough for two people to stand comfortably, its walls lined with wooden chests that contain the priest's robes, the alb of white linen, the chasuble worn over it, the stole that marks priestly authority, each piece embroidered by women of the parish with symbols and patterns that have meaning beyond mere decoration. The chests themselves are made of oak, bound with iron, their lids heavy and their locks solid, protecting contents that represent significant wealth and hold great symbolic importance. Inside one chest, you might find altar cloths folded carefully, changed with the seasons and feast days to reflect the liturgical calendar: green for ordinary time, purple for Advent and Lent, white for Easter and Christmas, red for Pentecost and Martyrs' Days. In another chest, the priest keeps his books: a Bible, a breviary containing the daily prayers, perhaps a missal with the prayers and readings for Mass, each volume copied by hand on vellum made from calf skin, their pages thick and slightly translucent, their bindings of leather over wooden boards, their clasps of brass or bronze. These books represent thousands of hours of work by scribes who copied text letter by letter, who created decorated capitals at the beginning of chapters, who mixed their own inks from soot and oak galls, who scraped vellum smooth and ruled lines to guide their writing. A single such book might take a year to complete and cost as much as a small house, which explains why they are locked away when not being used, protected from theft, fire, moisture, and the countless small accidents that could destroy irreplaceable objects. We leave the church interior and return to the night outside, where the air seems warmer by contrast with the church's interior chill. The moon has risen higher now, climbing toward midnight, and the village settles deeper into sleep. A dog barks once in the distance, then falls silent. An owl calls from the woods beyond the fields, its voice carrying clearly in the still air, answered by another owl farther away. These sounds do not disturb the peace, they are part of it, natural elements of the night that medieval people would have found comforting, evidence that the world continues its normal patterns. Walking through the village now, we feel the weight of history and tradition, the sense that this place has been inhabited for so long that the very earth holds memory. Every stone in the church wall, every beam in the cottage roofs, every furrow in the ploughed field represents human effort applied over time, creating a landscape that is as much cultural as natural, shaped by countless decisions and actions until it becomes something unique, not wilderness, not city, but something in between, where human life and natural world exist in balance. We make our way toward the stream that runs along the village's southern edge, following a path that winds between cottages and garden plots. The path here is earthen rather than cobbled, softer underfoot, quiet where the cobblestones clicked with each step. On either side, fences made of woven hazel stakes separate garden plots from the path, each plot showing evidence of recent harvest, empty beds where cabbages grew, dried stalks where peas climbed, the withered remnants of herbs that were cut back before frost. These gardens supplemented the family diet with vegetables and herbs that could be grown in small spaces, tended in early morning or evening after fieldwork was done, providing variety and nutrition beyond what grain and meat alone could offer. Each family developed expertise in certain crops based on their garden's conditions. One plot might be particularly good for onions, another for leeks, a third for turnips that could be stored through winter. Seeds were saved from year to year, with the best specimens from each harvest set aside for next season's planting, creating strains adapted to local conditions and family preferences. The sharing of seeds between neighbors created social bonds and ensured diversity, so that a blight affecting one strain would not destroy everyone's crop simultaneously. The stream appears before us suddenly, its presence announced by sound before sight, the gentle murmur of water moving over stone, a sound that varies with the season and recent weather, but never entirely ceases. In this season, with autumn rains having filled the stream but not yet created the spring floods to come, the water runs clear and steady, about knee-deep at its center, perhaps 10 feet wide from bank to bank. The banks themselves are reinforced with stones placed to prevent erosion, creating a semi-permanent edge that guides the water without trying to completely control it. Willows grow along the banks, their roots reaching into the water, their branches drooping to touch the surface, creating curtains of vegetation that move gently in the breeze. These willows provide raw material for basket weaving, their flexible branches harvested in rotation to ensure the trees remain healthy while supplying the village's needs. The stream serves multiple purposes. It powers the village mill, located downstream from where we stand, where grain is ground into flour by the turning of a great wooden wheel. It provides water for livestock, brought here to drink at designated places where the bank has been worn down to create easy access. It offers washing sites for clothes and linens, the stones along its edge worn smooth by decades of fabric being beaten against them to drive out dirt. And it provides fish, small ones mostly, but welcome additions to the diet, caught by children with simple hooks and lines, or occasionally by adults with nets during spawning season. A small wooden bridge crosses the stream here, just wide enough for a cart if driven carefully, its planks laid across stone supports that sit in the stream bed, positioned to resist the current without blocking flow. The wood of the bridge is grey and weathered, its surface rough enough to provide traction even when wet, its edges showing the wear patterns of countless wheel passages. Standing on this bridge, looking down at the water moving beneath, we can see the stream bed clearly in the moonlight smooth stones ranging from pebble size to larger than a fist, arranged by the current into patterns that shift slightly with each flood but remain generally stable. Water weeds grow in the slower sections, their long stems flowing with the current like hair in wind, providing shelter for tiny fish and the insects they feed on. The sound of the water is hypnotic, constant, but infinitely variable. Each ripple and splash slightly different from the last, creating a natural music that would have been the soundscape of anyone living near enough to hear it, a rhythm that marked time as surely as church bells, but in a gentler, less insistent way. Beyond the stream, the land rises slightly toward the edge of the forest that marks the boundary between cultivated land and wilderness. This forest is not the untouched primeval woodland that might once have covered this entire region, but rather a managed woodland that provides timber, fuel, nuts, game, and a dozen other resources the village depends upon. Different sections of the forest are in different stages of growth, the result of systematic harvesting that ensures a continuous supply of wood in various sizes, small branches for kindling, medium poles for construction, large timber for beams, and major projects. This practice, called coppicing when applied to trees cut to the ground, and pollarding when applied to trees cut above deer browsing height, encourages trees to produce multiple stems from a single root system, effectively allowing one tree to be harvested many times over centuries. The stumps of coppiced trees become gnarled and massive, looking almost like natural sculptures, their bark thick and textured, their centers often hollow, but their outer growth vigorous and healthy. Hazel is commonly coppiced, producing straight poles useful for wattle fencing, basket weaving, and tool handles. oak might be pollarded, its upper branches cut every 15 or 20 years to provide building timber while the trunk continues to grow. Ash, willow, and alder each have their places in this managed system, chosen for specific properties: flexibility, water resistance, ease of splitting that make them valuable for particular purposes. Walking toward the forest edge, we pass through a zone of scrubland where the woodland gives way to open ground. Here grow brambles and wild roses, hawthorn bushes and blackthorn, creating a thorny barrier that helps define the boundary and provides additional resources. Blackberries in late summer, rosehips and sloes in autumn, thorny branches for makeshift fencing when needed. Birds nest in these thickets, protected by the thorns from predators, and small mammals create runs through the densest growth, invisible to casual observers, but well-worn paths for those who use them regularly. The scrubland smells different from both village and forest wilder, less shaped by human activity, carrying scents of earth and decomposing leaves, fox musk and rabbit droppings. The sharp green smell of crushed nettles and the sweeter scent of wild herbs. This is a liminal space, neither fully cultivated nor fully wild, showing characteristics of both, serving as a transition zone that softens the boundary between human and natural realms. At the forest edge proper, the character of the night changes. The openness of the village and fields gives way to enclosure as trees rise overhead, their branches creating a canopy that blocks much of the moonlight, plunging us into deeper darkness. The path we follow is narrow here, wide enough for a person walking or a horse picking its way carefully, but not for a cart. It winds between trees, following the easiest route rather than imposing human geometry on the landscape. The trees closest to the path are oak and ash mostly, their lower branches trimmed away to allow passage, but their upper reaches spreading wide, their leaves now fallen and lying thick on the forest floor. Walking this path requires care. Roots cross it in places, creating natural steps and obstacles, and the fallen leaves hide irregularities that could turn an ankle. But the path is well used and well known to the villagers who come here for wood or hunting, their feet wearing it smooth, despite the constant accumulation of forest debris. The sounds of the forest at night are different from those of village or field. The wind moves differently through tree branches than through thatch or wheat stems, creating a sound that is both louder and more diffuse, like a distant conversation in an unknown language. Small creatures rustle in the undergrowth, mice and voles going about their nocturnal business, hedgehogs shuffling through leaf litter in search of insects, perhaps a fox passing silent as shadow on its nightly patrol. Birds that sleep through the day become active owls, hunt from high perches, their extraordinary hearing allowing them to locate prey in complete darkness, their nearly silent flight enabled by wing feathers that reduce turbulence to a whisper. Other birds roost in the branches, hundreds of them sometimes, their combined body heat creating pockets of warmth that help them survive cold nights, their soft chirps and shuffles audible if you listen carefully. The forest is not silent, but its sounds are subtle, requiring attention to notice, rewarding patience with glimpses into a world that operates according to rhythms older than human settlement. We come to a small clearing where the forest opens enough to allow moonlight through, and here we find evidence of human activity, a woodcutter's station with neat stacks of cut logs waiting to be split and carried to the village. The logs are oak, their cut ends showing growth rings that tell their age this tree lived, perhaps 80 years before being selected for harvest, its size and straightness making it valuable for beams or planks. The bark has been left on for now, which helps prevent cracking as the wood dries, but eventually it will be removed and used for tanning leather, every part of the tree finding a use. Beside the stacked logs, a wooden sawhorse stands ready for the next workday, its surface scratched and gouged by the saw blade passing through countless pieces of wood, its construction simple but sturdy, designed to be moved from place to place as work demands. A chopping block sits nearby, its top surface covered with the scars of axe strikes that missed their mark or cut through to hit the block beneath. Each scar, a tiny story of work performed, technique practiced, effort applied. The axe itself is not here too valuable to leave unattended. It would have been carried back to the village at day's end, sharpened and oiled, before being stored away from weather and potential theft. The clearing shows signs of regular use beyond the current woodcutting a fire ring, where workers might warm themselves on cold days or heat water for tea. The stones blackened by smoke and arranged in a careful circle to contain flames. Ashes fill the center, grey and cold now, but ready to be swept aside and fresh kindling laid for the next fire. Around the fire ring, the ground is worn smooth where people sat or stood, and a fallen log has been dragged in to serve as a bench, its bark mostly rubbed away, its surface polished by the friction of cloth and leather. This is a place of work, but also of rest, where the rhythm of labor cut, split, stack, cut, split. Stack is broken by moments of pause, where men might share food brought from home, discuss village news, plan the next day's work, or simply sit in companionable silence, their backs warmed by the fire, their hands wrapped around cups of weak ale or water drawn from a nearby spring. Leaving the clearing, we follow the path deeper into the forest, moving away from the village and its cultivated lands, entering older woodland where the trees have stood for generations without being harvested. Here the canopy is thicker, the undergrowth sparser due to limited light reaching the forest floor, and the sense of enclosure becomes complete. The path is less distinct now, more a habit of passage than a deliberately maintained route, and we must watch our footing carefully. These old trees, some of them may be 200 years old or more, have developed character that young trees lack. Their trunks are massive, too large for one person to reach around, their bark deeply furrowed, their lower branches thick as young trees themselves. Some lean at angles, supported by neighbors, their roots intertwined beneath the soil in networks that share resources and provide mutual support. Others are hollow at the base, their hearts rotted away by time and weather, but their outer shells still living, still growing, testament to the tenacity of life. These hollow trees provide shelter for countless creatures. Owls nest in them, bats roost in them, insects burrow in the soft wood, creating ecosystems within ecosystems. Life building upon life in layers of complexity. The forest floor here is covered with a thick layer of leaf mold, the accumulated decay of many autumns compressed into a spongy mat that gives slightly beneath each step. This layer is not waste but wealth, the forest's own compost, breaking down slowly to release nutrients back into the soil, feeding the trees that produced it in a cycle as old as forests themselves. Fungi grow here in astonishing variety, some visible as mushrooms pushing up through the leaves, others existing entirely as underground networks of thread-like filaments that connect tree roots and facilitate the exchange of resources between plants. These fungal networks might span acres, linking hundreds of trees in a communication system that we are only beginning to understand, allowing mature trees to share resources with young ones, helping the forest function as a collective organism rather than a collection of individuals. The mushrooms we see are just the reproductive structures, the visible tip of vast underground networks, appearing when conditions are right and disappearing again within days. But the mycelium persists year-round, doing its invisible work of decomposition and connection. We pause beside an ancient oak, its trunk so wide it would take 3 people holding hands to encircle it, its bark so thick and ridged it creates deep shadows even in the filtered moonlight. This tree was old when the village was founded, and it may stand for generations more, outliving everyone who knows it currently exists. Its lower branches start far above our heads, spreading out to claim space in the canopy, while its roots extend even farther underground, reaching down to water sources and spreading wide to anchor against storms. A tree this size produces thousands of acorns each autumn, most of which are eaten by wildlife, but a few of which sprout to create the next generation, ensuring continuity even as individual trees age and eventually fall. The oak supports an entire community of dependent species insects that live nowhere else, birds that nest in its branches, mammals that eat its acorns, lichens and mosses that grow on its bark. All of them part of the intricate web of relationships that makes a forest more than just a collection of trees. Standing here, resting a hand against the rough bark, if we could, we would feel the solidity of it, the sense of permanence that such a tree conveys. The reminder that human lifespans are brief compared to the slow time of forests. The path leads us eventually to a small stream, narrower than the one that flows past the village, this one perhaps 2 feet wide, running quick and clear over a bed of rounded stones. The sound it makes is brighter than the larger stream, a chuckling burble rather than a murmur, and the water is cold enough to make your teeth ache if you were to drink it. This stream originates from a spring somewhere higher in the forest, and it will join the larger stream eventually, contributing its flow to the water that turns the mill wheel and sustains the village. The banks here are mossy, soft, and green even in the low light, providing cushioning for any creature that comes to drink. We can see evidence of such visitors, the delicate prints of deer in soft mud, the broader tracks of badgers, the tiny marks of voles and shrews, all testament to the stream's importance to forest wildlife. The water reflects what little light filters through the canopy, creating a moving mirror that shows distorted images of branches and sky, a liquid pathway through the dark forest. Following the stream upward, we climb gently through the forest, the sound of water our constant companion, until we reach the spring itself, a place where water emerges from between rocks, clear and cold. Its source, the underground aquifers that collect rainfall and release it slowly through porous stone. The spring is surrounded by a natural basin that has formed over centuries as water flow carved the soft stone, creating a pool perhaps 3 feet across and a foot deep before the overflow continues downstream. This water is as pure as any natural water can be, filtered through layers of earth and stone, emerging at a constant temperature regardless of season, never freezing even in the hardest winters. Medieval people knew such springs were valuable, often marking them as sacred sites, dedicating them to saints or building small shrines nearby to acknowledge the gift of clean water. This particular spring may have such a history, though we see no shrine now. Perhaps one existed once and has crumbled away. Or perhaps this spring was known only to the village and needed no formal recognition beyond the gratitude of those who benefited from it. The area around the spring is lush with mosses and ferns that thrive in the constant moisture, creating a green oasis even when the rest of the forest is brown with autumn. The rocks that surround the spring are covered with moss, so thick and soft it looks like velvet, holding water like a sponge and releasing it slowly, maintaining the humidity that keeps this microclimate distinct from the drier forest beyond. Ferns grow in the crevices between rocks, their fronds unfurling in spring and remaining green well into fall, their spores produced on the undersides of leaves in patterns of mathematical precision. The air here smells of water and stone and growing things, clean and fresh, invigorating after the slightly musty smell of the forest floor. Birds come here to drink and bathe, and on the muddy edges you can see the impressions of their feet, tiny three-toed marks that show their presence even when the birds themselves are hidden. This is a place of renewal, where the earth gives forth its bounty without asking anything in return, where life is sustained by the simple gift of clean water emerging from darkness into light. We sit by the spring for a time in our imagination, comfortable and still listening to the water and the wind, to the forest settling around us, feeling the peace of this place sink into our bones. The night is deep now, well past midnight, entering that quiet time when even nocturnal creatures slow their activities and the world seems to hold its breath. The moon has travelled across the sky, its light changing angle, creating different shadows and revealing aspects of the forest that were hidden before. We are far from the village here, far from the comfort of walls and firelight, but we are not lost. The path is known, the way back clear, and there is something profound about being out in the darkness, experiencing the world as it exists when humans are not trying to shape it to their purposes. This forest is managed, yes, but it is also allowed to be itself, to follow its own rhythms, to maintain the wild character that makes it forest rather than farm. Eventually, we rise and begin our return journey, following the stream back down, retracing our steps through the old woodland and the clearing where logs are stacked, emerging finally at the forest edge where scrubland marks the transition to open land. The village lies before us, its shapes barely visible in the darkness, most of its residents deep in sleep, their dreams unknown to us, but perhaps shaped by the same landscapes we have been wandering, the fields they work, the stream they visit, the forest they depend upon. We cross the bridge over the stream, its wooden planks solid beneath our feet, and enter the village again, moving through lanes we walked earlier, but which feel different now, familiar yet changed by the passage of hours and the deepening of night. We pass the church again, its stone walls still glowing faintly in the moonlight, its presence solid and reassuring, a reminder of continuity and faith. The graves in the churchyard rest quietly, their occupants long past caring about the affairs of the living, yet still connected to the community through memory and prayer, through the rituals that mark life's passages. We pause at the churchyard wall, looking across the graves toward the dark bulk of the church, and we can almost hear the echoes of all the services held here, all the prayers spoken, all the songs sung. Layer upon layer of human devotion, accumulating like the leaf mold in the forest, creating a foundation for future generations. The manor house shows a single light still burning in one window. Perhaps the lord or lady cannot sleep, or perhaps a servant tends to some late task. The light is warm and steady, likely from a candle or oil lamp rather than rushlight, speaking to the greater resources available to the household. We do not approach the manor now, but observe it from a distance, noting how it sits slightly separate from the cottages, not physically distant, but set apart by the symbolic fence and the larger scale of its construction. The hierarchy of medieval society is written into the landscape, the manor larger than the cottages, the church larger than the manor, each structure's size reflecting its importance in the social and spiritual order. This hierarchy may seem rigid to modern eyes, but within it, people found stability and meaning, knowing their place and their responsibilities, understanding how they fit into the larger community and how that community fit into the divine order. We make our way toward the village outskirts, completing our circular journey. And as we walk, we notice the eastern sky is beginning to show the faintest hint of grey, that barely perceptible lightening that announces dawn's approach still an hour or more away. The stars near the horizon fade slightly as the sky begins its long transition from black to blue to gold. In the cottages, people will soon wake to their second sleep, or perhaps rise entirely to begin the day's work, stoking fires, feeding animals, preparing the endless meals that sustain life. The pattern will repeat, as it has repeated for countless days before, and will repeat for countless days to come, until someday the pattern changes and medieval England gives way to something else, but not yet. Not now, for now the village sleeps, the forest stands, the stream flows, and the world continues its ancient rhythms, heedless of human concerns, generous with its gifts to those who work with it rather than against it. We stand at the edge of the village, looking back at what we have seen, the cottages with their thatch roofs and smoke holes, the manor house with its glazed windows and tiled roof, the church with its stone tower pointing toward heaven, the fields awaiting next season's planting, the forest offering its resources to those who manage it wisely, the stream providing water and power and life. This landscape is not natural in the sense of being untouched by humans, nor is it artificial in the sense of being divorced from natural processes. It is something in between, a partnership between human effort and natural systems, each shaping the other, creating a whole that is greater than either part alone. The people who live here know this intimately. Even if they never articulate it, they know their lives depend on the cooperation of sun and rain, soil and seed, animal and plant, working with these forces to produce food and shelter and all the necessities of life. The night has been our companion through this journey, allowing us to see the village in its most peaceful state, when the busyness of the day has ceased and the landscape reveals itself in stillness. We have walked the cobblestone lanes and earthen paths, crossed bridges and entered buildings, moved from cultivated land through scrub to forest and back again, following water from its source to its uses, seeing how every element connects to every other, how nothing exists in isolation, but all is part of a web of relationships. The moonlight has shown us shadows and highlights, has revealed textures and shapes, has made the familiar strange and the strange familiar. And now, as the moon sets and dawn approaches, as our journey ends where it began at the village edge, we can rest, knowing we have witnessed a world that, for all its hardships and limitations, possessed a coherence and harmony we might do well to remember. The final cottage we pass shows the first stirrings of waking. A faint glow appears in the window as someone lights a rushlight or builds up the fire, preparing for the day ahead. Soon others will follow, and the village will wake fully, and all the activities we have seen evidence of will resume: baking and brewing, ploughing and planting, cutting wood and drawing water. All the work that sustains life and community. But we need not witness this transition. Our journey has shown us what we came to see: the medieval English village at rest, peaceful in the deep night, its people and animals and buildings existing in that space between the day that was and the day that will be. A moment of pure stillness before the world turns again toward motion. We close our eyes now, letting the images of the night sink deeper into memory. The thatch roofs silver in moonlight, the cobblestones worn smooth by generations of feet, the smell of wood smoke and herbs, the sound of water over stone, the feel of cool night air carrying autumn's promise, the taste of that air, slightly sweet with fallen leaves. These images will remain with us, a sanctuary we can return to whenever we need peace, whenever the modern world becomes too loud or too fast, whenever we need to remember that humans have lived quietly and contentfully in times past, that simplicity is not poverty and slowness is not failure, that there is wisdom in working with, rather than against, the rhythms of nature and community. The journey ends as all journeys must, returning us to ourselves, to our own beds and our own time, carrying with us the gift of having witnessed another way of life, another relationship between humans and the land they inhabit. Medieval England, for all we might criticize about its social structures or technological limitations, understood some things we have forgotten: the value of locality, the importance of community, the necessity of living within the means that land and labor can sustainably provide. We need not romanticize or wish to return to that time, but we can learn from it, can extract lessons that remain relevant even in our vastly different circumstances. And so we rest, letting sleep come as it will, our minds filled with images of a medieval English village on a quiet night, our breathing slowing to match the pace of that gentler time, our thoughts drifting like smoke from cottage fires, dispersing into the darkness, becoming part of the night itself, finding the peace that comes from simplicity and connection, from work well done and rest well earned, from being part of a community that spans not just space but time, linking us to all who came before and all who will come after, all of us sharing this earth, all of us seeking meaning and connection, all of us, in the end, simply human, simply here, simply resting in the great darkness that holds us all. Let sleep come now, gentle and complete, carrying you into dreams of stone and thatch, of stream and forest, of moonlight on cobblestones and starlight on still water, of a time when night was truly dark and rest was truly earned, of a peace that asks nothing and gives everything, of a silence that speaks more clearly than any words, of a journey completed and a rest deserved. Sleep now, sleep deeply. Sleep in the peace of a medieval English night, where the only sounds are wind and water, breath and heartbeat, and the gentle turning of the world through the darkness toward dawn.